The story begins with a man named Charles Bukowski, a poet, novelist, and infamous drunkard who defied the odds to become a literary sensation. But his journey wasn't the typical rags to riches tale of grit and perseverance. In fact, Bukowski's tombstone reads, "Don't try." That stark epitaph encapsulates his philosophy. Success didn't come because he relentlessly pursued it, but because he accepted his flaws and embraced them unapologetically. For decades, Bukowski's work was rejected by publishers. He spent his days in a dead-end job at a post office and his nights drowning in alcohol, gambling away whatever little money he had left. By all accounts, he was a failure. But he didn't wallow in self-pity or try to reinvent himself as some shining paragon of virtue. Instead, he channeled his self-loathing and discontent into his writing. When an editor finally gave him a chance, Bukowski grabbed a typewriter and pounded out a novel in just 3 weeks. The result, Post Office, became a sensation not because it was perfect but because it was brutally honest. Bukowski's story defies the cultural narrative that says success comes only through relentless effort and optimism. He didn't achieve fame by trying to fit into society's mold or by convincing himself he could do anything. Instead, he succeeded because he stopped trying to be someone he wasn't. His acceptance of himself as a failure allowed him to tap into a raw authenticity that resonated with readers. Our culture is obsessed with positivity. From self-help mantras to Instagram influencers, the message is clear. Be happier, healthier, richer, smarter. But this constant pressure to improve often backfires, reminding us of everything we lack. There's a cruel irony: trying too hard to be happy often makes us miserable. Imagine a confident man walking into a room. He doesn't have to declare his confidence. It's evident in how he carries himself. Now picture someone desperately trying to appear confident, overcompensating with bravado and hollow gestures. The difference is stark. The first man doesn't try because he doesn't need to. The second man tries because deep down he feels inadequate. The same applies to success and happiness. Those who achieve it often do so not because they chase it relentlessly but because they focus on what truly matters, stripping away the unnecessary. The chapter concludes with a powerful truth. The relentless pursuit of positivity is a trap. Wanting more, a better job, a perfect relationship, or a flawless body only highlights what we don't have. True peace comes not from striving to be someone else but from accepting who we are. Bukowski didn't write because he wanted to be famous. He wrote because it was the one thing he couldn't not do. His life was messy, chaotic, and often ugly, but it was real. And that made all the difference. Happiness is a problem not because it's unattainable, but because most of us misunderstand it. Take the story of a young prince who lived in luxury, shielded from all suffering. His father built walls around the palace to ensure the prince never experienced pain, struggle, or discomfort. But despite having everything anyone could dream of, the prince felt empty. One night, he ventured beyond the palace walls and witnessed sickness, old age, and death for the first time. The sight shattered him. To make sense of what he saw, he left his life of luxury behind, embracing a life of extreme deprivation. Yet even in his suffering, the prince found no answers. It wasn't until he sat under a tree, reflecting on both extremes of his life, that he found balance and meaning. That prince, Siddhartha Gautama, became the Buddha, and his teachings revolve around a central truth. Life is suffering, and happiness comes not from avoiding it but from accepting it. Manson echoes this ancient wisdom, explaining that happiness isn't something to be achieved like a trophy or solved like a math problem. Instead, it's the byproduct of engaging with meaningful challenges. The pursuit of happiness often makes people miserable because they focus on eliminating problems rather than choosing better ones. Problems never go away, they just evolve. As Manson puts it, Warren Buffett has money problems, and a homeless person has money problems. The difference is that Buffett has better problems. A whimsical example from the book is the idea of a superhero named Disappointment Panda. This panda wouldn't save the day or bring joy. Instead, he'd go door to door delivering harsh truths people need to hear but don't want to accept. He might say, your relationship is failing because you're selfish, or your career isn't advancing because you don't work hard enough. People wouldn't love him, but they'd need him because happiness begins with confronting uncomfortable truths. Another key idea is that suffering drives action. Pain is a biological signal that something is wrong, whether it's physical or emotional. This is why we flinch when we touch something hot or feel heartbreak when we're rejected. Instead of avoiding pain, we must embrace it as a teacher. For instance, the emotional pain of rejection teaches us about boundaries and self-respect. Ignoring or numbing these feelings only delays the inevitable, making future problems harder to face. The pursuit of happiness often leads to what Manson calls the feedback loop from hell. Imagine you're anxious about being anxious or feeling guilty about feeling guilty. This loop traps you in a spiral of negative emotions. The solution isn't to chase positivity, but to accept that it's okay to feel bad sometimes. Happiness isn't the absence of problems. It's the willingness to confront them head-on. Manson challenges the common narrative of chasing happiness as a life goal. He argues that focusing on solving meaningful problems, not avoiding them, is what truly matters. Happiness isn't a final destination. It's an ongoing process. Like the Buddha under the tree, we find peace not by escaping suffering, but by understanding its role in shaping our lives. Life will never be free of problems, but when we learn to embrace the right ones, we unlock a deeper, more fulfilling kind of happiness. Modern culture feeds us a seductive lie that we are all special, destined for greatness, and deserving of admiration simply for existing. But this obsession with exceptionalism, Mark Manson argues, is not only unrealistic, it's harmful. When everyone believes they must be extraordinary, the average becomes unacceptable. This creates a paradox. We crave recognition while feeling inadequate because we compare ourselves to unattainable standards. Take Jimmy, a guy Manson knew who was the epitome of confidence, or so it seemed. Jimmy was always pitching grand ideas, from revolutionary apps to groundbreaking business ventures. He name-dropped CEOs, bragged about upcoming keynote speeches, and made it sound like he was on the brink of success. But in reality, Jimmy was all talk. He spent most of his time getting high and mooching off friends and family. Despite having accomplished nothing, Jimmy believed he was a misunderstood genius, dismissing criticism as jealousy or ignorance. His delusional self-confidence shielded him from the painful truth. He was ordinary. Jimmy's story highlights the pitfalls of exceptionalism. The more we believe we're special, the harder it becomes to accept failure or criticism. This leads to a culture of entitlement, where people feel they deserve rewards without earning them. But entitlement is a double-edged sword. Some feel entitled to greatness without effort, while others feel entitled to sympathy because of their struggles. Both mindsets are rooted in an inflated sense of self-importance. Manson dismantles the myth of being special by pointing out the simple truth. Most people are average. Statistically, it's impossible for everyone to be exceptional. And that's okay. Greatness doesn't come from being born extraordinary. It comes from doing extraordinary things. It's the result of effort, persistence, and choosing the right values, not a birthright or a personality trait. This obsession with being special is fueled by social media. We see curated snapshots of other people's lives and assume everyone else is more successful, attractive, or interesting than we are. But this comparison game is a trap. Just as Jimmy deluded himself into thinking he was on the verge of greatness, we trick ourselves into believing we're falling short. The truth is, everyone has their struggles, but those don't make it onto Instagram. Manson's point isn't to crush your dreams, but to liberate you from the pressure of being extraordinary. When you stop needing to prove your uniqueness, you can focus on what truly matters. Ironically, it's often those who embrace their ordinariness who achieve the most. They aren't weighed down by the need to impress others or live up to unrealistic expectations. Instead, they take action, learn from failure, and steadily improve. The chapter's lesson is simple yet profound. You don't need to be special to be happy or fulfilled. The constant pursuit of exceptionalism is exhausting and, more often than not, futile. True satisfaction comes from accepting who you are and committing to values that align with your life, not society's standards. Once you let go of the need to be extraordinary, you create space for genuine growth and fulfillment. Suffering is unavoidable, but not all suffering is created equal. The quality of our lives often depends on the quality of our struggles. In this chapter, Mark Manson dives deep into why our pain matters, how it shapes us, and what distinguishes suffering that leads to growth from suffering that holds us back. Manson begins by comparing self-awareness to an onion. Self-awareness isn't a single revelation. It's a process of peeling back layers, each one revealing something deeper about ourselves. The first layer is acknowledging simple truths. I feel angry, or I feel hurt. The next layer digs into the root causes. Why do I feel this way? And the final layer is the hardest to confront, our personal values. Often, the way we choose to measure our lives, our successes, and our failures is fundamentally flawed. Peeling back these layers can be painful, but it's the only way to find clarity and purpose. Take the example of Dave Mustaine, a musician who was kicked out of Metallica just before the band became a global sensation. Devastated, he dedicated his life to proving his worth. He went on to form Megadeth, a wildly successful band that sold millions of albums. But even at the height of his success, Mustaine felt like a failure because he was measuring himself against Metallica's achievements. His suffering, rooted in a value system tied to being the best, left him perpetually dissatisfied. Contrast this with Pete Best, the drummer who was replaced by Ringo Starr in the Beatles. Best didn't let his ejection define him. He built a fulfilling life outside of music, finding happiness in his family and career. The difference lies in their values. Mustaine clung to toxic values, while Best embraced healthier ones. Manson argues that much of our suffering comes from pursuing shitty values. These are values tied to superficial metrics like wealth, fame, or being liked by everyone. They're rooted in external validation and are impossible to fully achieve, leading to chronic dissatisfaction. Good values, on the other hand, are grounded in reality and are intrinsically rewarding. Examples include honesty, creativity, and personal growth. These values require effort and often involve pain, but they lead to a deeper sense of fulfillment. Another example Manson provides is the idea of rock star problems. Imagine the problems faced by a successful musician managing fame, dealing with criticism, and maintaining relationships under constant scrutiny. These are better problems than struggling to pay rent or find food, but they're problems nonetheless. The point is, everyone suffers. The key is choosing the kind of suffering that aligns with your values. Manson encourages readers to redefine how they perceive suffering. Pain isn't inherently bad, it's a sign that something needs attention. Just as physical pain warns us to avoid harmful situations, emotional pain signals where our values may be misaligned. By examining the root of our suffering, we can identify and shift to values that bring meaningful challenges instead of endless frustration. Ultimately, the value of suffering lies in its ability to guide us. It's not about avoiding pain but embracing the struggles that matter. Life will always have problems, but when we choose the right problems, those aligned with healthy values, we transform suffering into a source of growth and fulfillment. The real question isn't how to avoid pain but what kind of pain we're willing to endure. Every moment of your life you are making choices, sometimes consciously, often unconsciously. The choices we make determine the quality of our lives, yet many people avoid acknowledging their role in those decisions. In this chapter, Mark Manson highlights the importance of ownership and responsibility in shaping our experiences. Imagine being handed a bad deck of cards in a game. You didn't choose those cards, but how you play them is entirely up to you. Life works the same way. You may not be at fault for certain circumstances, being laid off, losing a loved one, or facing health issues, but you are always responsible for how you respond to them. This is what Manson calls the responsibility/fault fallacy. Fault and responsibility aren't the same. While fault determines who caused the problem, responsibility determines who has to deal with it. Consider William James, a philosopher who became paralyzed at a young age. Devastated, James faced a choice. He could resign himself to misery or choose to find meaning despite his condition. He embraced responsibility for his response, dedicating his life to philosophy and leaving a profound legacy. His transformation wasn't about controlling his circumstances but owning his reaction to them. Manson explains that blaming others or external circumstances can be seductive. It's easy to fall into the trap of victimhood, convincing ourselves that life is unfair and there's nothing we can do. While this mindset may offer temporary comfort, it ultimately disempowers us. Victimhood allows us to avoid responsibility, but it also robs us of agency. Choosing to take responsibility even for things that aren't our fault gives us the power to change our situation. Responding to tragedy is another area where responsibility plays a critical role. Manson tells the story of a man who lost his family in a tragic accident. Struggling with grief, he decided to use his pain as fuel to help others. He began counseling people who had suffered similar losses, finding purpose in the process. His circumstances were horrific, but his choice to take responsibility for how he dealt with them transformed his life. Manson also touches on how genetics and upbringing influence our choices. Yes, you may have inherited certain tendencies or grown up in difficult conditions, but clinging to these as excuses only holds you back. You didn't choose the hand you were dealt, but you can choose how to play it. Genetics and upbringing are starting points, not destinies. Another danger lies in what Manson calls victimhood chic, a cultural phenomenon where people compete over who has suffered more, using their hardships as a badge of honor. While acknowledging pain is important, wallowing in it as a source of identity can trap people in cycles of helplessness. Instead of focusing on what's out of your control, Manson suggests focusing on what you can do with the hand you've been dealt. Ultimately, life is a series of choices, and the freedom to choose is what makes us human. By taking ownership of your reactions, decisions, and values, you gain the power to shape your life. This doesn't mean you'll avoid pain or hardship, it means you'll face them with purpose and clarity. Responsibility is liberating because it forces you to confront your own agency. When you stop blaming others and start choosing your response, you reclaim control over your life and set the stage for meaningful change. Certainty feels safe. It's comforting to believe we know who we are, what we stand for, and how the world works. But Mark Manson argues that certainty is an illusion and a dangerous one at that. Growth requires embracing the fact that we're probably wrong about most things most of the time. This chapter explores how doubt, humility, and curiosity can transform our lives. Manson opens with a simple truth. Our beliefs are built on shaky ground. The world is too vast and complex for any of us to fully understand it. Think back to what you believed about life, relationships, or success a decade ago. How much of that still holds true today? Chances are your perspective has shifted and it will again in the future. That's because knowledge and certainty are always evolving. What seems obvious now may later prove false, just as past convictions may now seem absurd. To illustrate this, Manson introduces Manson's law of avoidance, which states, the more something threatens your identity, the more you will avoid it. If you've built your sense of self around being a caring parent, a successful professional, or a loyal friend, anything that challenges those identities will trigger discomfort or denial. This is why people cling to outdated beliefs, even when faced with evidence to the contrary. It's easier to protect our ego than to confront the possibility that we might be wrong. Consider Galileo, who challenged the belief that the Earth was the center of the universe. His findings were met with fierce resistance, not because people lacked intelligence, but because the idea threatened their worldview. Today, we face similar challenges, whether it's admitting fault in a relationship, questioning our career choices, or reconsidering long-held values. Being wrong isn't a sign of failure. It's a sign of growth. As Manson points out, the only way to improve is to recognize where we're falling short. One of the most powerful tools for embracing uncertainty is curiosity. Instead of seeking to prove yourself right, ask questions. Why do I believe this? What if I'm wrong? What can I learn from this perspective? These questions create space for exploration and transformation. They also dismantle the illusion of certainty, which often leads to rigidity and conflict. Manson also discusses the dangers of pure certainty, which can manifest as arrogance, dogmatism, or even cruelty. History is filled with examples of people who were so certain of their beliefs that they justified atrocities in their name. This isn't just about politics or religion, it's about how we treat others in everyday life. Certainty breeds judgment, while doubt fosters empathy. When we accept that we might be wrong, we become more open to understanding others. But self-doubt has its limits, too. The goal isn't to wallow in uncertainty or paralysis. Instead, Manson suggests adopting a mindset of practical uncertainty. This means recognizing that you're probably wrong but acting anyway. It's about balancing humility with courage, knowing that growth comes from trial and error. Manson shares his own experience of confronting doubt. Early in his career, he built an online business that failed spectacularly. At first, he blamed external factors: bad luck, market conditions, or uncooperative clients. But as he peeled back the layers of his self-awareness onion, he realized the problem lay in his own flawed assumptions. This realization was painful but liberating. By accepting his mistakes, he gained the clarity to start over and eventually build something better. The chapter closes with a profound reminder. Life is an endless process of becoming. We'll never have all the answers, and that's okay. What matters is the willingness to question, adapt, and grow. Embracing our fallibility isn't a weakness, it's a strength. It's the foundation of learning, connection, and ultimately, a richer and more fulfilling life. Failure isn't something to fear. It's something to embrace. Mark Manson flips the common narrative of success on its head, arguing that failure is not only inevitable but essential for growth. This chapter explores why failure is the engine of progress and how shifting our perspective on it can lead to a more fulfilling life. Manson begins with the paradox of success and failure. The two are inextricably linked. To achieve anything meaningful, you must first be willing to fail, often repeatedly. Success doesn't happen in spite of failure, but because of it. The difference between those who succeed and those who don't isn't that the former avoid failure. It's that they learn from it and keep moving forward. He introduces the do something principle as a practical tool for breaking out of inaction. Many people wait for motivation to strike before they take action, believing that they need to feel inspired to start. Manson argues the opposite. Action leads to motivation, not the other way around. Even small, seemingly insignificant actions can create momentum. For example, if you're stuck in a rut and unsure how to move forward, just do something, anything. Take a step, however small, and let that step create the motivation to take the next one. To illustrate this, Manson shares the story of how he started writing. Initially, he wasn't motivated or confident, but he forced himself to write a blog post, even if it was terrible. That small act of doing something led to another post, and another, until he found his voice. Over time, his work improved, and what began as an uninspired effort eventually blossomed into a career. The key wasn't talent or inspiration. It was the willingness to start, fail, and keep going. Failure isn't just about mistakes or setbacks. It's also about redefining your relationship with pain. Pain, Manson argues, is a necessary part of progress. Whether it's the physical discomfort of exercise or the emotional sting of rejection, pain signals growth. Avoiding pain means avoiding the challenges that lead to improvement. Embracing pain, on the other hand, builds resilience and teaches valuable lessons. Take the example of Thomas Edison, who famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Edison didn't see his experiments as failures but as steps toward eventual success. This mindset allowed him to persevere when others would have given up. His achievements weren't the result of avoiding failure but of embracing it as part of the process. Manson also examines how fear of failure holds us back. Many people equate failure with shame, believing that a single misstep defines their worth. But failure isn't an indictment of your character. It's a natural consequence of trying something new. The most successful people in any field aren't those who avoid failure but those who fail the most. They take more risks, make more mistakes, and ultimately learn more. The chapter emphasizes the importance of being honest with yourself about your failures. It's tempting to blame external factors or make excuses, but true growth requires owning your mistakes. When you take responsibility for your failures, you gain the power to change and improve. It's not about beating yourself up. It's about using failure as a mirror to reflect on what needs to change. Finally, Manson reminds us that failure is not the opposite of success but a prerequisite for it. Every achievement is built on a foundation of setbacks and struggles. The more you fail, the more you learn, and the closer you get to your goals. The willingness to fail isn't just a strategy for success, it's a way of life. It means embracing uncertainty, taking risks, and finding meaning in the process, not just the outcome. Failure isn't a dead end. It's the way forward. Freedom often feels like having unlimited options, but Mark Manson argues that true freedom comes from saying no. In this chapter, he explores how setting boundaries, rejecting distractions, and making deliberate commitments can lead to a more meaningful and fulfilling life. Manson begins with a counterintuitive truth. Every choice you make comes at the expense of something else. If you say yes to one opportunity, you're implicitly saying no to countless others. The key to a happy and purposeful life isn't saying yes to everything, it's saying no to the things that don't align with your values. This isn't easy. In a world of endless options, it's tempting to keep your options open, fearing that saying no might mean missing out. But by avoiding commitment, you also avoid depth, meaning, and growth. Consider relationships. Many people avoid commitment because they're afraid of losing their freedom. They stay in casual relationships, keeping their options open, but in doing so, they miss out on the intimacy and trust that only come from deep, long-term connections. Manson explains that rejecting one path to fully embrace another doesn't limit your freedom, it amplifies it. Freedom isn't about having endless choices. It's about choosing what truly matters and letting go of the rest. Rejection, Manson argues, is a fundamental part of life. You can't please everyone or pursue every opportunity, nor should you. Trying to avoid rejection often leads to a lack of boundaries, where you say yes to everything out of fear of upsetting others or missing out. This not only exhausts you but also dilutes your focus and energy. Setting boundaries, knowing when to say no, isn't selfish. It's essential for maintaining your integrity and pursuing what you truly care about. Take the example of a person who can't say no at work. They agree to every request, take on more projects than they can handle, and constantly push their limits to avoid disappointing others. Over time, this leads to burnout, resentment, and declining performance. By contrast, someone who sets clear boundaries can focus on what matters most, deliver better results, and maintain their well-being. The ability to say no isn't just a skill, it's a survival tool. Manson also highlights the role of rejection in building trust. Saying no to things that don't align with your values shows others where you stand. It creates clarity in relationships, ensuring that your connections are based on mutual respect and authenticity. When you set boundaries, you teach people how to treat you. Conversely, failing to set boundaries invites others to take advantage of you, whether intentionally or not. Commitment, Manson argues, is where true freedom lies. By committing to a cause, relationship, or goal, you free yourself from the paralysis of choice. When you know what you stand for, decisions become easier, and your life gains direction. Commitment also brings meaning. Whether it's dedicating yourself to a career, a partner, or a personal passion, choosing something and rejecting everything else allows you to invest deeply and experience the rewards of that investment. One poignant example Manson gives is his decision to commit to his wife. Like many people, he initially feared that marriage would limit his freedom. But he found that committing to one person allowed him to let go of the constant search for something better. That commitment deepened their relationship and brought him a sense of peace and stability that endless options could never provide. Finally, Manson emphasizes that saying no isn't about avoiding responsibility, it's about embracing it. Every time you say no, you're making space for what matters. Rejection isn't a loss. It's a choice. It's the act of deciding what's worth your time, energy, and love. Saying no doesn't close doors. It opens the right ones. True freedom isn't about doing whatever you want, it's about doing what's meaningful. Mark Manson saves the most profound truth for last. Death is the great equalizer, and confronting our mortality is the key to living a meaningful life. In this chapter, he delves into how accepting the inevitability of death can clarify our priorities, enrich our relationships, and bring purpose to our existence. We spend much of our lives avoiding the thought of death. It's uncomfortable, frightening, and final. But by pushing it to the back of our minds, we lose sight of what truly matters. Manson argues that embracing the reality of death forces us to focus on the things that give life meaning. It's not about morbid fixation but about perspective. Knowing our time is limited helps us cut through the trivial and prioritize what's essential. Manson recalls the story of his friend Josh, who passed away suddenly at the age of 19. Josh's death shook him to his core. It forced him to confront the fragility of life and question the direction he was heading. In the wake of Josh's passing, Manson realized how much of his energy had been wasted on superficial pursuits seeking approval, chasing material success, and avoiding failure. That moment of clarity reshaped his outlook. He began to focus on the values that truly mattered to him, knowing that his time, like Josh's, was finite. Death strips away pretenses. When you recognize that everyone you know, including yourself, will one day be gone, the trivialities of life lose their grip. The argument with a co-worker, the minor embarrassment, the petty grievance, they all pale in comparison to the vastness of mortality. This isn't nihilism. It's liberation. By acknowledging death, we free ourselves to live more fully. Manson introduces the concept of something beyond ourselves. People find purpose in many ways through relationships, art, religion, or causes greater than their individual lives. These pursuits allow us to transcend our mortality, leaving behind something meaningful even after we're gone. Whether it's raising a family, creating a work of art, or contributing to a community, these acts of legacy give our lives significance. He also emphasizes the importance of confronting death with honesty. Many people try to outrun death through achievements, possessions, or even denial. But no matter how much wealth or fame you accumulate, death comes for everyone. It's only by facing this reality that we can live authentically. Instead of fearing the end, we can use it as a reminder to cherish the present and act with intention. One of the most poignant examples in the chapter is the story of a hospice nurse who spent years documenting the regrets of the dying. The most common regrets weren't about things people had done, but about things they hadn't done, relationships they neglected, risks they didn't take, and dreams they let slip away. These stories serve as a stark reminder that the time to act is now. Waiting for the perfect moment often means waiting until it's too late. Manson argues that the ultimate freedom lies in accepting death. When you stop fearing it, you stop fearing life. You no longer waste energy on trivialities or anxieties about the future. Instead, you focus on what truly matters: love, connection, creativity, and contribution. Death isn't the enemy. It's the catalyst for a meaningful life. The chapter ends with a call to action. Life is short, unpredictable, and often messy, but that's what makes it precious. Instead of avoiding the thought of death, use it as a guide. Let it remind you to live with courage, clarity, and compassion. Because when the end comes, and it will, the only thing that will matter is how fully you've lived. In the face of death, every choice becomes clearer, every moment more valuable, and every relationship more meaningful. And that, Manson suggests, is the subtle art of not giving a F***ck. Mark Manson's The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F*** is not a guide to apathy or indifference. It's a blueprint for living a life of intention, meaning, and clarity. The book challenges the relentless pursuit of positivity and the obsession with being extraordinary, instead urging us to focus on what truly matters and to let go of the rest. It's about finding freedom not in endless options but in deliberate choices, in saying no to the trivial so we can say yes to what's essential. At its core, the book is about responsibility, taking ownership of our values, our actions, and the meaning we create in our lives. By embracing failure, confronting pain, and accepting our mortality, we discover the truths that truly matter. Life isn't about avoiding problems, but about choosing the right problems, ones that align with our values and push us toward growth. Manson's message is clear. We don't control everything that happens to us, but we do control how we respond. When we let go of the need for certainty, the fear of failure, and the illusion of permanence, we free ourselves to live authentically. This isn't a life without struggle. It's a life where struggle is meaningful, where pain serves a purpose, and where every moment, fleeting as it is, becomes an opportunity to embrace what matters most. In the end, the book reminds us of the one universal truth: we're all going to die. But far from being bleak, this truth is liberating. It strips away the superficial and reveals what's real: our relationships, our passions, and the legacy we leave behind. When we stop giving a f*ck about the things that don't matter, we create space for a life that does. And that, Manson argues, is the ultimate art. And that's it for today's journey into the subtle art of not giving a fck* by Mark Manson. Life isn't about having it all or being extraordinary, it's about choosing the right struggles, embracing failure, and focusing on what truly matters. Remember, your time and energy are limited, so spend them on the things that align with your values and give your life meaning. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more insights into life-changing books, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What's one thing you're ready to stop giving a f*ck about? Thanks for watching, and until next time, take care, live intentionally, and keep creating a life that matters.